This video is all about the ColorCert Scorecard Server. It's a little bit lengthy, so I'm including this index to help you find specific topics that may be of interest if you need to refresh your memory. Also, I should mention that when you are granted access to a scorecard server, you will receive an email that includes the URL or link to the server, and the email will also include a username and password that you will use to log into the server. Thanks, and enjoy the video. Today we're going to take a look at the ColorCert Scorecard Server. Just a couple notes before I begin. In some cases, a scorecard server may be owned by a brand. When this is the case, printers are asked or required to upload run data to the scorecard server, and they are provided access to log into the scorecard server. When this is the case, the converter will only have access to their own run data. In other words, you won't be able to see data from other converters, nor will other converters be able to see your run data. That's an important point to understand. In other cases, the scorecard server may be owned by the printer themselves, and this is oftentimes the case, in which case you'll have access to all of the data in the scorecard server. You will be able to segment and sort that in different ways. If you have more than one plant, you can look at the data plant by plant. You can even drill down and look at the data by an individual press. And you would also have the option of sharing this data with a particular customer. Just as a brand can share data with a particular printer, you could choose to allow a particular customer of yours to see your run data. And it's also not uncommon that a particular printer will have their own scorecard server, and they will work for one or more brands that will require them to upload data to the brand scorecard server. And we can easily accommodate that in that scenario. At the end of a production order, you simply upload the data to both scorecard servers, and we have the ability in the software to accommodate that. I am using today a demo scorecard server, and if you look in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see that it simply says ColorCert Scorecard Server. That's because this is not branded for any particular brand or converter. When you log into the scorecard server, you're brought automatically to the dashboard tab. You'll notice at the top of the screen here there are various tabs, and as I said, when we log in, we are brought directly to the dashboard tab. The dashboard is all about seeing an overview of what's happening in your operation. At the very top, we're going to see a couple of bar graphs. The first one here is showing the current month, and as I stated, this is a demo scorecard server, so there isn't necessarily a lot of data, there isn't necessarily consistent data, and in fact you're going to see there's a lot of variability in the data, much more so than you would expect to see in any real live printing organization. But in any event, this first graph is showing the current month. The numbers here at the bottom, you can see the 18 and the 19. These are actually dates. So there was nothing uploaded to the server between the 1st and the 17th. So the data is a little spotty. If this was an actual print operation, I would expect to see data being uploaded virtually every day. The height of these gray bars show the number of jobs that were uploaded on any particular day. So if you look over at the right hand side, you can see the scale is 0 to 10. So on the 19th, it looks like there was 3 jobs uploaded. On the 18th, just 1 job. The black dot that are plotted here show the average score of jobs uploaded that day. And this looks like it's right around 70 to 75 in that neighborhood. The top of the red area here is 50, which is typically the cutoff between acceptable or unacceptable. And so this will allow you to see what's happening in the current month. And just below that is another graph which is showing the last 6 months. So you can look back and see how many jobs have been uploaded every month, as well as the average score. Now this is probably more variation than we would expect to see in a normal operation. I mean, if we look back at January, the average score was about 35, and here in May and June, we were up around 75 or 80. So that's probably more variation than you would expect to see. What I would hope to see is a line that's gently sloping up here. That's what we want to see, is an improvement in performance. Immediately below these 2 graphs is some information. We can see that this is showing us July, which is the current month. I can see the average score for July is 73.5. The previous month, which would have been June, the average score was 75. So our scores have dropped off a little bit in this month. I can also see this downward facing arrow shows me that the scores in June were lower than the scores in May. So looking at this as a manager, that's probably something that would grab my attention right away and cause me some concern. But what I do see is that 100% of the items passed the 50% threshold, which is really good. If I look back here, this is showing me the last 12 months, and I can see that the average score for the last 12 months was 58.1. So the fact that we're at 73.5 in July and 75 in June is really good when we look over the last 12 months, because that shows that we have improved these last couple months. This bar graph is not just a graphic. This is actually real live data plotted in here for the last 12 months. Again, if this was real, this would really be a concern, because we're all over the board. Okay, this is showing that, if this was real, and again, this is not real, but if it were, this would show that, our production is jumping all over the place. To the right of these graphs is information about individual metrics. And again, this is about seeing a snapshot of what's going on, but this can be really valuable information. For example, this is showing final job score, but it's also showing me the score for primaries, spot colors, substrates, and then the compliance rate along with the final score. In the previous month, which was June, everything looked fairly decent. However, when I look at July, here's one thing that's really jumping out at me. The final job scores are good. Our dot gain is like almost 97%, or excuse me, not a percent, but a score of 97, which is excellent. The substrate's really good. But look at my spot colors here. This is the solid reading for spot colors, and we only achieved a score of 53 on average. Now this is a grand average for all spot colors for the month of July. 53 is a really poor score. I mean, on average, that's barely passing. So that would be a concern to me. I would probably want to go see what's going on. And if I scroll down at the bottom of this page, and again, we're at the dashboard tab, this is showing me the last 10 jobs that were uploaded. And again, this is just about seeing a snapshot. So I see the job. This shows me the score in this column with either a red or a green bar depending on the quality. Lets me see if things are running well or if there's issues, anything I need to be aware of. So this is what the dashboard tab is all about. Let's move over to the Search tab. Now the Search tab is an area where you're likely to spend a lot of time. The Search tab allows us to search for specific jobs. Like I said, we could look at a specific press, date ranges, in any kind of metric that we want to search on. We would do so here at the Search tab. If I scroll down, right now we don't have any filters applied, so we're looking at all of our data, and you can see right now that we have 2,517 jobs have been uploaded. And of course I can toggle from page to page here down at the bottom. Let me point out this job in pink. You may wonder what that means. That means that someone has highlighted this job to be deleted, but they have not yet completed the deletion. It does take administrator rights to do that. I am logged in today as a user because I wanted to show this as you would see it as a user. If I was logged in as an administrator, I would have more tabs up here, more abilities, but again, I wanted to show you this as a user. So as the name of this tab would imply, this is where we're going to search for data. And there's multiple ways we can do that. One simple way, we can click on the headers at the top each of these columns and sort by any of these attributes. It makes sense to me to sort by date with the most current date at the top. So this is what I have right now. Now that's very rudimentary. That may or may not help you with what you want to do. But what's probably most useful is to set up search filters to allow us to really sort through the data. So let me hit reset here and show you what I did. At the top of the screen we have this button called Toggle Search Settings. And if I click on that, that will open up and show all of the different attributes that I have for searching. I can also change some of the information that's in these columns. So for example, this first column here, you can see has job, and that's coming from this here. If I wanted to change that to something else, it's not completely customizable, but I can change what appears in some of these columns. But what I want to do right now is use this Search For tab. You can see that by default it opens up to production date range, and oftentimes that is probably what we want to search for. But let me, the jobs that I've uploaded the last couple days are called Label Expo Green Scan. Let's search for everything that has Label Expo in the name. So what I would do is I would click on this drop down arrow next to production date range, and the name of the job is related to the job, so I'm going to select job details, and when I do that, that opens up a list of different items I can search by. And if you're familiar with ColorCert jobs, this is all the metadata that appears on the job info page. So let me search for job name, and I want to search for Label Expo. You'll notice that as I start entering this will bring up suggested lists, and it's pulling these from the names of different items that have been uploaded. So there's nothing uploaded that's simply Label Expo, but you can see we have 5 different items that include Label Expo in the name, and I want to search for all of them. So after I've typed in Label Expo, I'm going to hit apply, and now everything that has Label Expo in the name will be appearing at this list below. You can see now we're looking at just 45 jobs rather than 2,500. So this is a very small subset of the total jobs, but this is what's useful. Okay, this becomes very useful. I can also search by more than one attribute at a time. So let's just say I wanted to see everything that was run that included the name label Expo, but maybe I want to search for more attributes at the same time. At the top of this filter setup window, there's a plus sign. And if I click on that, that will open up a second search field. And let me show you a way that we could search by information coming from a specific press. And I would do that by searching for the particular dongle attached to that workstation. Again, just so it's clear what I did, in this new search window, I clicked on the drop down arrow next to upload date range, and I'm going to change that to uploader information. Here I can enter in the name of my ColorCert dongle. It just happens that I've changed the name of my dongle multiple times, but at least some of the time I had it reflect my name, so I just called it Bob Binder. I'm going to enter that for the seed ID and hit apply. Now you can see, all right, I think it was 45 before, now it's 43. So maybe we want to search this information even a little bit deeper. We search by job name, we've limited that to a particular press, and now maybe we're interested in looking at a particular date range. I can click this plus sign again to open up another search field, and let me change the drop down arrow to production date range. I could look at production or upload. Generally these coincide, if not exactly, within a day or so, but it's possible they don't. And I want to look for everything that's been run this year, which is 2019. So I'm going to set my start date for January 1st. And even though it's not December, let me pull this up. Everything through January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. And again, I will hit apply. And so now we're looking at just 11 jobs. All right, so now this takes a couple minutes to build up these filters, and let's just say that this is a condition I want to search for on a regular basis. Well, the good news is I have the ability to save this. At the very top of the window here, I have a button that's called Save Pattern. If I click this, it will allow me to enter a name, and I'm just going to call this Bob's Filter for lack of anything better. And I'll click on Save. Now, if I hit Reset, by the way, the reset takes away any filters, so now we're looking back at our 2,500 jobs. Or maybe I come back the next day, I have the ability under my Save Patterns to click on this drop down arrow. Bob's Filter is now added to the list, and if I keep adding more, this list will just become longer and longer. But I choose Bob's Filter, and now it takes me back to these 11 jobs. You'll notice I don't see all of my search criteria. If I want to see it, I can click on the Toggle Search Settings button, and it will show me. I can click on that again, and it closes that up. But now I'm looking at just those items that are set up by my filter. You'll notice that I can. There's a couple of options here. If I wanted to print the information about these jobs, I can click on the print button and it will format a report for me. All of the critical information for these particular jobs. Let me close out this print preview. I can also export these for Excel. I can export as a tab separated values. So I have some options there. And again, if I want to hit reset and look at everything, I just simply click the reset button. The next section we need to take a look at is the statistics section. And again, we have different tabs here. So I'm going to click on the statistics tab, and this will bring me over to this section. Let's take a look at this top section first. So I'm going to click on this Toggle Search Settings button just so we can kind of see what we have here. So the first section here, by default, we're looking at, and that's why I wanted to open this up. This will show us we're looking at printers. And so these are our top 10 printers, and we're looking at this information here. So we're looking at final job scores. We're looking at prints versus proofs, but we're looking at final job score. We're looking at the 10 highest scores. You can see that I can change this. If I wanted to look at everyone, I can do that. I'm looking at the highest first. This monthly, this applies to some of the graphs down below. And of course, I can apply different filters to this as well. I can put in different date ranges if I want, and I can apply things to these different search filters. If I am indeed a brand, this is probably useful looking at this information by printer. If I'm a printer with my own scorecard server, it might behoove me to look at customers. By the way, you can see I can also look at separators, so I can see how jobs from one separator compare to another. But let me switch this to customers for just a moment. Now I can see here my final job score for all of these customers. By the way, don't have any delusions that you're going to be running to scores of 95. Again, this is demo data, so this is probably not realistic data here. If I want to look at the lowest, I can do that and see which customers I'm underperforming for, and hopefully we don't have data that bad either. But you can look at all of these. Again, we can change the number. If I want to look at all of my various customers and how my data is appearing for them, I can do that. So there's a lot of different things I can do to configure this data. But this kind of gives me an overview of what's going on here. By the way, if I wanted to take a look at all of the jobs, so for example, I've run 60 different jobs for Acme Box Company. A couple things I can do. I can load the timeline, and this will show me sort of like the graphs at the beginning, the number of jobs and average score for those jobs over certain time periods. If I want to see more information, if I click on the Show Entry button next to that, what that does is that brings me back to the Search tab with a filter applied that's looking at just these jobs. And if you look down at the bottom, you can see that there's 60 entries here, which correlates to what we saw at the previous page. And these are, of course, all jobs that we run for Acme Box. So I can hit, again, the reset button at the top here. That will take me back to the top 10 where we were before. Moving down on this page, we have a graph which we looked at just a second ago when I filtered the data to Acme Box. With the reset button hit, this is showing me all data. This is similar to the graphs we looked at on the dashboard page, except that this is showing me all jobs from all time since the inception of the server. So you can see that this server was set up and first used in September of 2009, just about 10 years ago. And you can see that it wasn't used again for another 4 years. So it was set up and then not used, and then in 2013 it started to be used, and pretty solidly since that time. I would expect any of your scorecard servers to have data that's not this erratic. We're loading up all sorts of information, so our scores are up and down pretty violently. That would not be my normal expectation. I would expect over time a gently sloping line moving upward. Just so you know, as I do hover over points here, it shows me the number of jobs ran for a given time period, as well as the middle date. This is month over month data, so it's going to show like the 15th for every month, but the point I'm hovering over right now, this would be for November of 2016. There was 12 jobs ran that month, and the average score was 16. I can zoom in if I click on my mouse and drag over a region and let go of the mouse. It will then zoom in on that particular area. So now I can see this information in a little bit more detail. There's a reset zoom button. I can click on that and it takes me back to the full view. So this is just like the graphs at the beginning. This dark gray area represents the number of jobs ran month over month, and the black dots represent the average score for jobs ran during that month. Moving down on this page, this is kind of interesting information. We can look at information by color or by substrate. So for example, when we were at the search page, we were looking at a job called Label Expo Green, and I know that the light green color I'd actually set up for the demo that I do for that color to fail because it's more useful to take a look at how things are when they fail rather than just when things pass. And so if we look at this, you can see I've been using this for a couple years, this particular job, and you can see that this particular color is failing every time I read it. So and again, I can hover over this. So for example, this was March of 2019. You can see that that month I measured that job 3 times, and the average deviation for this particular color, the light green, was a delta of 5. Here some more readings of that in May, and the delta E was 3, and here we go in July, and again the delta E is 3. So you can look at particular colors, you can see how they've performed over time, and this is particularly useful if we have a color and we see that it's failing. We can look at it and see, hey, has this been failing just recently? Has it been failing over the course of time? That kind of thing. This can be useful information. And we can do the same thing for substrates. Every substrate that we upload to the scorecard server will appear here as a metric, so we can look and see how the substrates have fared over time. Looking at color data, the last tab here is the compare and analyze. This is probably the simplest tab here, and if I'm a brand owner, when I look at this, this is going to show me each of my printers, the number of jobs that they've ran, the average job score, the minimum, and the maximum score. So this will give you a real quick view of how each of your converters are performing, which ones are the top performers, how much job volume they're running, and this range between minimum and maximum score will also give you an indication of how big the variation is overall in their production. If you're a converter that has your own scorecard server, what I normally do is set it up so that each one of your presses is a quote supplier. And when we do that, rather than looking at printers in this list, we'd be looking at all of your presses. So you could look at this information by press. Again, we can apply filters to this, and so you could search for all those things. In fact, when I hit reset, you can see now there's a lot more printers appearing in this list. So this inherited a filter from something else. You could also sort this data by clicking on the column headers, just as we could do with the search tab. There are a couple other tabs here, and let me just mention them real quickly. The messages tab, I'm going to guess you'd probably not have a reason to use this. Basically what it allows you to do is set up and send a message to someone using a scorecard server. May be useful if you're a brand, if you want to send a message to all of your suppliers, but I do need to warn you that feature right now, as of July 2019 is not working. But we're aware of that. We will be fixing that. There's just hasn't been a great urgency to do so because this is pretty much a feature that was built years ago, and frankly, I don't think anybody uses it at the current time. The Preferences tab, if you want to come in and change your password, you can do that. You could even change your login name. If you wanted, you'll notice the account that I'm using right now. As I said, I've set this up as a user account. I actually called this account RotoPrint. I created that and I just use that for a lot of demos that I do. And finally, the last tab, which is labeled Imprint. This is just some copyright information, so probably no reason that you would ever even click on that. I would like to show you some ways that you can navigate around. Once you start using this, you're going to notice that as you move your cursor around, it's going to turn into a pointer because it's sort of like the net. You can navigate around. So as an example, from this dashboard screen, let's just say that I want to take a little bit more information. Maybe there's something about this particular job that causes me concern, or maybe, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it looks really good. And I just want to look at more information. You'll notice that as I hover over this, the cursor turns into a little pointer finger. So I can click on that. When I do that, you'll notice that it brings me over to the Search tab. And what it's done is it's created a filter that's looking for this specific job. And you'll notice if I hover over this job here, again the cursor turns into a pointer. I can click on this job and it will expand it. And it shows me a lot more information about this particular job. Now I can see the final job score, the score for dot gains, spot colors. Again, here we go. This one only had a 53 for spot colors. The substrate, I can see individual scores for all that information. There is some information here for the printers and the separators. So maybe I'm a brand owner and I'm concerned about this job. Well, guess what? The guy that's responsible is right here. I can click on his name, it'll open up an email and I can say what's going on with this job, that kind of thing. If I really have a big concern and I want to look at every detail of this job, I can actually download the ColorCert job and open it in ColorCert and I can see every reading. Over here on the right hand side, it then shows me all of the colors on this job and the average delta E for this run. So just as I mentioned before, these become pointers. If I click on one of these colors, this is that light green that we looked at a minute ago. When I click on that, if you look at the tabs up here at the top, it's taken me now to the Statistics tab, and it's applied a filter that's looking at just this particular job. So in the Printers section, it's showing me that this was RotoPrint, shows me the final job score. These are all the runs of this particular item, and so you can see how the score has varied over time. You can see that this was run, a few times. In October of 2018, it actually ran 12 times. Production dropped off. It's increased a little bit. What you can see here, though, if you look at this average job score, that, wow, this job is all over the place. Sometimes it runs well, sometimes it doesn't. Again, if I'm a manager now looking at this, I'm going to be kind of concerned, right? Because I have to say, what's going on with these guys' RotoPrint? Here in April of 2018, they ran it for me 4 times with an average score of 23. And that's certainly going to raise flags. Again, here we are looking at this light green color. We looked at this a minute ago. It's been moving. And let me show you this as well. For example, you can see that this trend line here. If I want to see more information, you'll notice that as I hover over this point, it turns into a, or this plot, it turns into a pointer, the cursor does. This ran 3 different jobs with an average deviation of 5. Again, I can click on this, and what that does, that brings me back to the search tab with a filter applied, looking at those 3 jobs. So I can see it ran, 3 times, all 3 of them pretty poor scores, one just barely passing at 55, one at 20, and one at 7. Again, if I want to see more information about this one that's 7, I can click on it, and you can see that all of these colors ran pretty poorly. I'm going to come back to the statistics page a second, and I'm going to hit reset, and I want to show you one final example here that I just happened to run into. I'm going to come here to the color area, and I'm going to search for a color called ESCO Box Demo Magenta. And the reason I want to show you this is this is where looking at this information can be quite useful. Now we didn't plan this to be this way, but I happened to be looking at this job. This was a job that we had set up also for demos, and if you look at this magenta ink, it's varying quite a bit. Here we had an average deviation of 5 delta E. For 4 months in a row doing demos that was 0, and then I had some 3s and 2 and some more 3s. This was not set up to fail like the Label Expo job was. However, if you look at this substrate, and this is where this kind of information can become quite useful. If I look at the ESCO Box Demo substrate, guess what? This substrate was varying, and if you look at the pattern mimics the poor performance of my ink. And when I say poor performance of my ink, it's actually the color, because I don't think the issue here was ink. Looking at this, I'm going to say that the issue here was my substrate varying. And of course, this is the kind of thing that you don't automatically jump to. I mean, if you go to a press with a job that's typically been running with an average delta of 0 and all of a sudden it's 3, we're probably going to go to the press operator and say, what's wrong? Why are you running like this? Why is this color failing? With this kind of information, we can see, and you can see this in the ColorCert job as well, we can see that, well, guess what? Our substrate is really performing poorly, and it exactly mimics the performance of our ink. So this kind of information, by gleaning this information, is really helpful to make improvements in your operation. So this has been a quick overview of the scorecard server. So you can search around and look at the information as much as you like, and it should be a great benefit to you.